Yeah, I actually felt pretty good about the situation, even during fight week when, you know, dude, we couldn't go anywhere without 7, 8 security guards around us, and then you go to the host hotel and there's state troopers and there's local police and then there's UFC security and everything else. And I'm like, God, this is overkill. And I was leaving the host hotel by myself, and I see a group of like 30 of Hamzat's crew of guys that I know, that I've trained with, that I shared the mat with, and that I respect and love. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, well, do I just pretend like I don't see him and like run out the front door? And I'm like, hell no, man. Like, I'm gonna go say hello to these guys. So I walked over by myself, and then Hamzat sitting on the couch jumps up, gives me a big old hug. I saw his coach Allen, I saw all the guys, and just the respect level that we all have for one another, and I appreciate that, man. Like, I'm not fighting, I'm not promoting the fight, I'm not being disrespectful. No one in the room is. And that fight is between him and Sean is my guy, and I have my guys back 100%. But I also want to show respect, and that's just my personality, man. But I felt good knowing that, like, I was there by myself. They wanted to jump me, they would have jumped me, you know. But I also wasn't just gonna run out the front door and pretend like I didn't know them, So just that interaction that we had, I was like,
Eric Nicksick didn't sleep much the night before UFC 328. Not because he was nervous about the game plan, not because he doubted his fighter, but because he genuinely didn't know if Sean Strickland and Khamzat Chimaev would make it a fight night without someone ending up in handcuffs. That's how real this thing was. And when people started whispering after the fight that maybe it was all staged, maybe it was all theater, maybe the hatred was manufactured for pay-per-view buys and pre-fight press conference clicks, Nicksick had one response. He leaned back, thought about it for a second, and told his manager Lance to go ahead and say it. Because Lance nailed it in a way that no broadcaster, no analyst, and no journalist could have said better. But we'll get to that in a second. What you need to understand first is what Fight Week in Newark actually looked like from the inside. Not from the camera angles. Not from the highlight clips of Chimaev kicking Strickland at the press conference. From the people who were living it, breathing it, walking the same hallways, and sharing the same fighter hotel. UFC 328 had extra security. Not the usual kind. Not the standard protocol that gets rolled out as a formality. The kind that gets called in when the people running the event genuinely believe something could go sideways. Earpieces, additional personnel, eyes on both camps at all times. That doesn't happen because two guys gave each other a mean look during a stare down. That happens because the threat level is assessed and someone in a room somewhere decides it's real enough to take seriously. Chimaev kicked Strickland at the press conference. On camera, in front of reporters. That wasn't a bit. That wasn't improv. That was a man who looked at another man and decided a press conference was close enough to a moment of confrontation that he was going to treat it like one. But here's what most people didn't see. Earlier that same week, Nicksick and some of his team were moving through the fighter hotel, and they crossed paths with Khamzat Chimaev. And what happened wasn't standoff. It wasn't a tense moment where everyone held their breath. Chimaev walked over to Nicksick and gave him a hug. Coach to coach. Human to human. Competitor to competitor. Nicksick said in that moment, he understood something about this sport that casual fans sometimes forget. The fighters hate each other. The coaches don't have to. The teams don't have to. And when you can separate those two things cleanly, when you can have your fighter despise the man across from him while you maintain enough clarity to see the full picture, that's when you know a camp is operating at a high level. He also said that hug told him something else. That no matter how heated the week got, no matter what was said on stage or posted online or shouted in corridors, the professional floor would hold. The event would happen. And two men who genuinely disliked each other would walk into that octagon and handle it the way fighters handle things. With their hands. 25 minutes. 5 rounds. A split decision that could have gone either way on any given judge's card depending on how you scored round 3. This was not a fight that left anyone feeling comfortable. This was not a performance where one man broke the other and made it look easy. This was two people at the highest level of the sport going to places that most human beings will never go and asking their bodies and their minds to keep finding something when the tank is empty and the legs are gone and the face is starting to swell, and every single second feels like a negotiation between pushing forward and surviving. And when it was over, something shifted. Strickland apologized. Not a PR apology. Not a carefully worded statement drafted by a publicist. He stood there in the octagon, new champion again, and said he was sorry for the way the promotion went. And Chimaev, the man who kicked him at a press conference, who had traded verbal grenades with him for years, who came within a decision of taking the title himself, wrapped the belt around Strickland's waist. That image broke the internet for about 18 hours. And then the take started. Was it real? Was any of it real? Did these guys just perform hatred for clicks and then laugh about it backstage? Is this pro wrestling now? Nicksick heard all of it, and Lance, Strickland's manager, gave him the only answer that actually made sense. Post-nut clarity. Now stay with the analogy because it's more accurate than it has any right to be. You spend weeks, sometimes months, locked onto one singular target. Everything is tension and build and heat and focus. And then the thing happens. And then it's over. And in the aftermath, you see everything differently. The fog clears. The adrenaline drops. And what was once a source of pure visceral hostility becomes something you can actually look at with fresh eyes. These two men hated each other on the walk to the octagon. They wanted to hurt each other for 25 minutes, and they did. They took time off each other's lives in the most literal sense that phrase can be applied. And then they looked at each other across that cage after the final horn, and something happened that competition sometimes produces and that regular life almost never does. They respected each other, not abstractly, not theoretically, in the specific, bone-deep way that only comes from shared suffering at that level. Nicksick put it another way. He talked about elementary school, about the fight you get into at recess that ends with a handshake, about the guy who was your enemy on a Tuesday and your friend by Thursday, because something about going at it with someone honestly, without weapons, without lawyers, just fists and will, creates a bond that defies the original conflict. He said his best man at his wedding was someone he fist fought, that the friendship came after the fight, not before it, that this is not unusual in the world that produced him as a coach and produced Strickland as a fighter. This is just how certain kinds of relationships get formed. Which brings us to what this title win actually means. Strickland is now a two-time middleweight champion. He shocked the world the first time at UFC 293 when he walked into Sydney as a massive underdog and systematically dismantled Israel Adesanya over 5 rounds in a performance nobody outside his camp saw coming. That one made him famous. That one made him a champion. That one changed his life. This one might have meant more, not because of the opponent, not because of the narrative, but because of the road that led here. After losing the title to Dricus du Plessis at UFC 312, there was a period where things between Nicksick and Strickland were not smooth. Nicksick acknowledged it without drama, said it was bumpy, said there were ups and downs, said he doesn't regret any of it because it made him better, made him a better coach, made their relationship closer and more honest than it had been before. The band getting back together and winning the title is a different kind of sweet than winning it the first time. It's the kind of sweet that has context behind it, that has doubt behind it, that has a moment where the ending wasn't guaranteed and might not have happened at all. Nicksick said it's like having 3 kids. You love them all. They're all different. You don't rank them. You just know each one for what it is and what it meant when it happened. This one happened after the hard part. That makes it different. That makes it its own thing. And somewhere in Newark, with a belt back around his fighter's waist, and Khamzat Chimaev walking out of that octagon with his head held up despite the loss, Eric Nicksick let himself feel all of it. Because it was real. Every single bit of it.